You've seen the title, you know what this is about. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a minute since I've done one of these initial impressions videos. I started doing them last year, did one for Tears of the Kingdom when that first came out, and then did another one for one of the live action One Piece trailers of all things. So yeah, I guess that's what I had to say a lot about last year. I've been looking for an excuse to make another one of these things. Probably could have or should have done one for Persona 3 Reload when that came out, but the problem was I was a little too busy playing Persona 3 Reload, so whoops. But yeah, Animal Well came out recently. People have been talking about it, and for my part, I've been very excited for it. It's been a game I've been hotly anticipating, and I've managed to get a couple hours into it so far, and it's definitely very interesting. I figure I might as well do a short little impressions video on it. So I know I'm a bit late to the party on this one, but might as well throw my 2 cents in there. To be clear, this is not my full or final thoughts on the game. That will be summarized in the end of year tier list as per usual. But I also want to make clear that this is coming from someone who has very little experience with Metroidvanias. Like, I think it's understandable given my age and when I started playing video games. Like, I'm 23, I started getting into really following gaming news in like 2015, 2017, something like that. And so by that point, I think like the peak of Metroidvanias had kind of come and gone. I mean, there were still indie exceptions to that, of course, Ori, Hollow Knight, Dead Cells, Axiom Verge. And those are all games I've been intending to get to for years, but just haven't yet because my backlog is massive. I guess the main game I want to compare Animal Well to is probably Metroid Dread. Primarily because it's the main Metroidvania I have played. Like I said, pretty limited experience with that, but I feel like Dread is a good comparison point. For one, it's the most recent, like, major Metroidvania release, or like AAA Metroidvania release, that I can think of off the top of my head. And number two, it's by Nintendo. They're kind of like the originators of this genre of game, so I guess it's kind of interesting to compare Animal Well and it being this new, fresh indie take on Metroidvanias to what the originators of the genre have kind of planned for it. I know Metroid Dread is not maybe your most typical Metroidvania, but it's still a very interesting take on it. So it's kind of interesting to compare the two. I think I will say I had some fairly high expectations for Animal Well. Might have already said that, but I think just the announcement of Bigmode as Video Game Donkey's publishing company was very, very cool, very unexpected. For me, I mean, Donkey is just a YouTube icon. Love him. He's very entertaining, but also unapologetically himself. And I think a publishing company feels like a very appropriate choice for someone who so clearly loves the medium of video games as he does, as well as just like creating things, art and multimedia entertainment in general. It feels like he has a pretty wide appreciation for a variety of art forms, and so yeah, it feels like this move kind of fits him well. During Animal Well's announcement, I definitely got the impression that he, and mind the pun, wanted to go big for Bigmode's first game release. He was very clearly very excited to announce this game, and I think even if you don't think he's like the greatest game reviewer, usually when he's excited about a game, I think it's for all the right reasons. Like when he praises a game, he praises the game hard, and it's usually well-deserved praise. And so it feels like he had a lot to praise this game for, and so for that reason, I was excited. I definitely got the impression that this was going to be something big. Or he considered this something big. Of course, he could be biased because it's his company, but he's supposed to hype the game up. But I still bought it on launch day. I had faith in him and this release. So and even though I've been a little busy, I keep a fairly busy schedule. I've managed to get a few hours in. Play it a little bit here and there. Give it a shot. I'm not entirely sure where to start with Animal Well, so I might as well start with the presentation. Things that were kind of apparent in the trailers. So I guess just presentation wise, just wow. Just wow. That's really all I have to say. This game is gorgeous. It's got this lovely, lovely pixel art style that I don't think I've seen the likes of before. Like, I don't want to call it HD 2D because it's not like other HD 2D games like Octopath or Bravely Default or something like that, where those feel like a kind of a traditional top-down adventure game, except someone flicked like RTX on and suddenly they've got like ray-traced lighting and like realistic backgrounds and stuff like that. It feels a little weird blending of art styles and visual styles within one game. I mean, those are cool and they look good, but that's not what Animal Well goes for. Lighting, effects, animations, like all of it is within this one overarching art style. It's all in the same art style, but it's so incredibly dynamic and fluid. Like, this game feels so like it's so clean. Like, the animations are so clean. I didn't know explosions could look this good. I think it's the lighting really that sells it. The lighting feels super dynamic, and yet it's very well done within this singular pixel art style. It just looks so nice. It's got this CRT TV-esque filter that I don't recall seeing the likes of before. There's just something about that really does it for me. I think it's kind of like it recalls like older horror movies for some reason. I have like some sort of association with this sort of filter with older horror movies, maybe like The Ring. I guess maybe it's something to do with like the CRT filter and like the darker colors, like the darker blues and blacks of this game, and like the very like dynamic lighting, how it fades off really quickly. That's really cool. I don't know. It just works so well for this game. Sound design is just utterly fantastic. Music, sound effects, they're so nice. It's just everything is so. It just creates a slightly eerie atmosphere. Everything is just slightly eerie, and I think that brings me to my first comparison point with Dread. Dread was very like intense. I guess eerie is a word that I would use to describe the atmosphere of a lot of Metroidvania games, and Dread was definitely eerie. It was very intense, very eerie, but it was intense in sections. Like, when it was intense, it's very intense. Those Emmy zones, they scared the hell out of me when my first playthrough. And Animal Well is not nearly as creepy, like at its peaks. You know, I guess Dread has like those zones of like you're in the zones and you're terrified, and then once you get out of the zone, you feel like you can just breathe again. And, you know, you still gotta watch out for enemies, but it's more or less like generally relaxed exploration, or it's at least a lot more relaxed exploration. Whereas Animal Well is generally relaxed exploration, but like there's this constant feeling of ever so slight unease as you're going throughout the world and throughout the, I guess, exploring the world of Animal Well, exploring this map. I think especially given like the dynamic lighting, like I said, it fades off really quickly. I think what really does it is the game has like a hard transition from one screen to the next. It's very difficult to see what's coming, and then also even like when you're on one screen, because of that dynamic lighting, it can be difficult to see, you know, things that are on the same screen as you. You know, you may even just get to a screen and something pops up unexpectedly while you're like halfway through exploring that screen. So yeah, this game is just, it feels like it's constantly keeping you on your toes. And as one who is not generally a fan of quote unquote scary things, I do really like it. It feels like a very appropriate level of tension. It's constantly keeping me invested in the game. It's great. It's such a good atmosphere. I love this. I'd say the world is also a lot more open than I expected it to be, which sounds a bit like a stupid observation. You know, it's a Metroidvania. It's supposed to be non-linear. You know, they're mazes. You know, a path is closed off when you first get to it, and then you go down the path you're already on, and eventually it gets you to an item, and you see like, oh, this item will help me unlock the path that I passed down earlier. So you go back, you unlock that path, and that path leads to more paths that are usually blocked off and need more items. So, you know, it's like, that's how Dread was, at least when I first played it. And, you know, it is very maze-like in that sense, but using Dread yet again as my point of comparison, there is still like a linear order to which you completed objectives. There were various areas and branching paths and items and stuff within Dread, but there was still like a linear order. There was a set order to which you collect items and then backtrack and then explore more paths. Like, you can still create a step-by-step guide to beating Dread, and it is more or less how people are going to play Dread every single time. Like, first you need to do this item, then you backtrack to this location, and then you go down this path that was blocked off before. And even though it's still very maze-like, you know, there's still that set order of things, of puzzles that you need to solve and items that you need to collect and so on and so forth. Animal Well is, like I said, it's open and kind of like immediately open. It does have that similar maze-like structure of like, there's a lot of branching paths, and some of them are blocked off and some of them are just, you know, puzzles that you need to solve to get to these paths. But like, it gives you multiple paths right off the bat, and you can explore any one of these paths to a certain extent and get an item, and that item unlocks new paths on the various other paths or on your path. And it's just, it feels like this constant back and forth of like, I go down one path, I get stuck, so I go down another path, that gives me an item, okay, now I can try something new on the first path. And then, you know, it's just constant going back and forth of like the various paths of like, okay, what did I get on this new path? What new ideas has that given me? How can I explore the previous paths or the current path I'm on even further? It feels like there's this constant like push for exploration. There's no like set order in which you complete the paths and complete puzzles. And I guess there's a much more choice, I guess, to how you do things. If I'm reading the room right, it feels like a lot of people are talking about how deep Animal Well is as a game, or how deep it feels, and I definitely agree, and feel like this kind of more open, non-linear structure is what helps it feel as deep as it does. Also, I think like part of it is also the items that I've unlocked so far. All of them feel relatively simple in concept, but you can get very creative with how you use them, and that is, I think that has been really cool to see. Because by getting creative, you can start unlocking optional paths, you can unlock optional collectibles like the eggs and the secret bunnies, which I'm not sure what they do yet, but I'm very curious to find out. You can start solving puzzles that you couldn't solve before, or start solving things in a new way. You can go to one area which you had to go through one way before, except now you have a new item and it allows you to complete this area in a different way this time, and that gives you a new path to explore or something like that. It's just, it feels like it's very difficult to get stuck on something in Animal Well. There's always like something that this game is pushing you to like solve or be creative for, or even if you're stuck in this one area, you can just go to another area and start solving puzzles again. It just feels like there's so much to do in this game. There's this constant like going back and forth between areas, and I really like it. It's been really fun. I guess if I had to summarize Animal Well, I'd say it's been altogether a very approachable Metroidvania, which, again, I'm only a couple hours in, but it feels much more approachable than at least Dread did. Dread was very, very good. Don't get me wrong, but it was also very difficult. Like, it had a great world, it had great atmosphere, it had great combat, great puzzles, exploration, like all of that was fantastic. But it was like I said, very, very intense. You know, those Emmy zones are horrifying. You know, the boss battles were not unfair per se, but they were challenging. They were very, very challenging. And there were definitely more than a few moments where the game just straight up said like, "Hey, time to get good." You know, it was a tough kick in the pants. You know, it was very easy to get stuck in Dread because, like I said, it's it's got this maze-like structure, but there's still kind of like linear order to which you need to complete things. And sometimes, you know, you get an item and it's like, okay, now what? And so you're it's just constant backtracking of like trying to figure out what exactly you missed or where you need to go back to. Or like I said, you're getting stuck on a boss battle, which is not unfair, but it's very, very difficult. So yeah, and as I understand it, it is generally regarded as one of the more difficult entries in the Metroid series. But I know Metroidvanias can get a lot harder. And it definitely gives me the idea, at least, that high difficulty is very much a standard for the genre. So that's kind of a bummer. Definitely makes it harder to get into than a lot of other genres. But Animal Well has felt much easier to get into, at least. It's a generally relaxed experience, but it still has its more difficult or tense moments. You know, the puzzles, the atmosphere keep things tense, keep you on edge, just that little bit to keep you motivated and keep you attentive. And like the puzzles, like I said, they're tricky. So, you know, you go to one puzzle, you get stuck, so you just go off and do another puzzle. It just feels like it's a lot harder to get stuck in Animal Well. There's so much to explore that it's like, even if you get stuck in one area, you can just go do something else, like I've said. But despite that lower barrier to entry, it still feels very deep, and that is what has probably impressed me the most with it. There's lots of optional objectives and collectibles. There's a lot of those items and puzzles that are very simple in concept and yet pretty complex in their implementation. And again, like, this is just an outright beautiful game. It's lovely, just straight up lovely. I love how this game is presented. So I don't feel like there's a whole lot to not like with Animal Well. It's so, long story short, it's really cool, guys. Like, Animal Well is really cool. I've been really, really liking it so far. So, yeah, I know I'm not the only one that's been liking it, but again, like I said, these are just my 2 cents. So, yeah, those are my initial impressions on Animal Well. So unless I upload another video saying otherwise once I finish it, you should probably check out Animal Well. It's been pretty cool. I'm definitely under the impression that this is going to be the one of the bigger indie hits of this year. So yeah, definitely board the bandwagon while you still can. Anyways, that's all I really had to say. I'm gonna go back to playing Animal Well now. Bye.